Do you use timesheets to manage your professional services firm and for charging your clients? My guest today would argue that timesheets kill innovation. They distort behavior, they reduce your margins, and perhaps worst of all, they make bad work look good. I'm interviewing Ron Baker, legendary author of many books, including The Firm of the Future and Time's Up, both of which he wrote with Paul Dunn. Ron is a sought-after speaker, founder of VeraSage Institute, and host of the Soul of Enterprise podcast. In this episode, we're going to explore what happens when you stop billing by the hour and instead build your firm around the value given, or even better, the transformation you deliver. If you want a clearer, calmer, more profitable way to run your firm, this episode is for you. Welcome to De-Stress Your Business, the podcast where we show you how to get incredible results in your business without constant stress. I'm Alexis Kingsbury, a serial entrepreneur and founder at Air Manual, and I'm joined today by Ron Baker. Great to see you again, Ron.
You too, Alexis. Thanks for having me.
Oh, absolute pleasure. Let's dive in because I want to maximize the time that I've got with you. What is the transformation economy?
The transformation economy is the next level that we're already in, actually. This isn't something that anybody's predicting. We're already firmly in it. And basically, we've moved from an agricultural economy where we extracted commodities. Then we moved into the Industrial Revolution where we produced goods and services, or goods, I should say, cars, washing machines, that type of thing at scale, efficiencies, economies of scale, all of that. In the 1920s, the world started to move into the service economy that was, bespoke, customized, delivered as needed on time to the customer. And then the timelines here are fuzzy, but around the 60s, 70s, 80s, we started to move in to the experience economy where people spent more of their money on travel and going to Disneyland or Disney World or amusement parks and movies and things like that. And that was in the 80s. And now we're seeing the final stage, which is the transformation economy. And that is, unlike experiences or goods and services, that is when businesses help guide us into a new future. They actually change our identity. There's usually a from-to statement. I went from being a smoker to a non-smoker. I went from meat eater to vegan. Or for a business, I went from, taking an accounting firm. I went from billing by the hour and tracking time to a timeless firm. Those types of transformations actually change the identity. When businesses guide transformations, it's not about the goods and services anymore. They are being subsumed into the transformation. So the emphasis is no longer on goods and services. It's on moving customers to a desired future state.
Fantastic. And so I know that we both work a lot with professional services firms and particularly with accountancy firms. What would be the difference between the accountancy firm that's focused on delivering a service, perhaps one focused on an experience, and what would that look like under the sort of transformation economy lens?
The accounting firm that is focused on transformation is messaging and marketing around that economic offering. They're no longer talking about the services. Think of it this way, and this is going to scare the heck out of every person listening to this. Where would you earn your money if you gave all of your services away? Everything, audit, tax, CAT, all free. What would you charge for? It would be the transformation.
And so for professional services firms that you've worked with, what does that then look like in the firm? They're delivering a transformation. What would we see different perhaps if we were a client?
Oh, you'd see a lot of things different. You'd see more meetings. You'd see more hand-holding. You'd see more guidance. A firm probably with fewer customers because they need to have a deeper impact on the customers they are privileged to serve. And you can't do that when you have 2,000 customers. I'm sorry, but you just can't. And that's not why any of us became CPAs anyway. We became CPAs to help people. I can't help 2,000 people. I can help 100, maybe 50, some type of Dunbar number, 50 to 150, have an incredibly deep impact on their lives. And the great thing about accountants is they can do it serially, meaning you can do one transformation after another. We can help the kid get into college when they're born, at least financially, grow their business, make it more valuable, help them sell it at a higher price, help them retire sooner, help them build a dream home, help them plan their legacy after they're gone. In other words, we have the privileged position of being able to guide transformations literally from womb to tomb. Not many businesses have that opportunity, and we do. And that's why I think a business model that puts the relationship at the center, not the products and services, but the relationship, which is why we think the subscription model fits really nicely with the transformation economy.
Yeah, and I think that point around that subscription model is an interesting one, because I saw you speak at an event recently at ProfitCon. You talked about how you see a lot of businesses who charge a monthly fee or an annual fee or whatever and call it a subscription model. But you argued that that's not the case unless you're providing an ongoing value, which can work well with taking a client through transformation, but also that you're continually updating and improving the way in which you do that, so that there is an increasing value to the client of staying with you on that subscription, and that the client has the option to end that subscription the same way as you can end your Netflix subscription or whatever. How does that show up for these firms where you've seen that they've struggled to really grasp this, when they're not quite making the changes enough? What does that look like?
Yeah, the subscription model is completely different than, say, moving from hourly billing to value pricing, which is also a business model change. But moving from hourly to subscription, or even from value pricing to subscription, is also a business model change, because at least two things happen when you change a business model. One, your pricing's different. And in subscription, you no longer care about the math of the moment. You're looking at customer lifetime value, which is modeled off the financial statement information. But even the financial statements look different. They start with, beginning annual recurring revenue, and the bottom line is ending annual recurring revenue, not profit. And you could take all your profit and reinvest it in the business to grow your customers. As long as the bucket's not leaking, you're growing an annuity base, a lifetime annuity base that's greater than the cost to acquire. So it's a completely different mindset with subscription. The other thing that changes when you change a business model are the KPIs. So we're no longer looking at profit per job, profit per hour, or profit per customer. Taking a portfolio approach like an investment banker or a private equity firm, or indeed the approach you take with your retirement portfolio. You have some low risk, low return, medium risk, medium return, high risk, high return. But what you care about is the optimization across the entire portfolio, not each and every single investment every hour, which is nuts. I mean, we accuse businesses of being short term. Look at accounting firms who are trying to figure out profit per hour. I mean, that's ludicrous and impossible, by the way, because it's full of arbitrary assessments and judgments and allocations. And that's why we think the subscription model is best for transformation, because it looks at the long term.
Fantastic. And so leaders of businesses that you've seen, like, holding them back from making shift, which I believe you would see as, it's an economic shift. It's a shift in all industries at the moment. And as a result, presumably you'd argue that, staying stuck behind is going to put you at a disadvantage, maybe not an existential one, but certainly one in terms of your ability to capture profit. So sort of, do you see traps leaders from making the shift from selling time to transformation? What would you say to them to help them realize, this is where they need to be going?
Yeah, and this is the difficult part about this is, unlearning. Unlearning is the key skill, I think, going into the future. Unlearning is incredibly difficult. None of the stuff that we talk about in the transformation economy is that hard to understand intellectually. I mean, accountants are smart people, but it's the unlearning of the old ways. I'm constantly asked if this transformation economy is way ahead of the market, way ahead of where CPA or accounting firms are now. Is it a solution to a non-existent problem? And my only answer to that is I hope so. I hope we're ahead of the market. I don't want to be behind the market, Because you look at Kodak, look at Blockbuster. I mean, we go down a long list of companies that didn't keep up with the times. And the great thing about the transformation economy is, and you alluded to this, Alexis, you said it, this is not a new business model. This is a new economic era. That's a colossal, it's as substantial as moving out of the agricultural economy into the industrial economy, or industrial into service economy. It's massive, and and the train's already left the station. So you've got to adapt your business model to this new offering, and at least be aware of it, because it's out there. I could give you hundreds of examples from major industries, from transportation to healthcare to even automobiles are thinking about this. And accounting firms are poised. I don't see this as a threat. I see it as a huge opportunity.
Indeed. Certainly, I think, as you say, there's left the station. And if I think about, when I've been at business events that perhaps I've been speaking at or whatever, and I, I'll often take that as an opportunity to go and do research. So I'll go and listen to other people speaking, and I'll talk to other people there. And often what I'm seeing, if we take the accountancy industry, because both there, I see a lot of talk about, in the case of compliance, work is dying. And often that gets criticism, because people say, well, actually, no, it's not dying. Like, people are still going to need it. And if anything, particularly at the moment in the UK, with changes in taxes and additional like MTD, which means that suddenly a load more people have to do quarterly returns and all these sorts of things, there's an argument to say, well, actually, no, there's still all this work. Surely that's not dying. But what I am seeing is huge pressure on profit margins, because your client isn't valuing the compliance in the same way. And some of it, perhaps arguably, for unfair reasons, but a lot of it for fair reasons. I remember when I started the software businesses that I own now, 15 years, or one of them 15 years ago, I was one of the early customers of Xero as an accounting solution. And I remember teaching my accountant how to use Xero. And of course, one of the challenges is I was looking at it going, okay, I can produce my P&L. I can produce my balance sheet. I've got to get these transactions in. I've got to set up the integrations in my bank accounts. I can set up bank rules for how these transactions get reconciled. And often when the accountant, my accountant will ask me how I need to treat these different things. And often there's a conversation, or I do a bit of Googling and I find out the answer. Where's my accountant going to be adding value here? And so I remember even back then, 15 years ago, applying considerable downward pressure on the pricing, because I'm saying, look, I get that I might not be your normal client. I'm going to be doing a lot more than most of your clients, so that, the ones that bring a box of receipts. But, I want to be charged fairly given what you're going to be actually providing. And of course, with other AI tools and reporting tools and so on, that need reduces even more. And so I can totally see why accountants are then feeling, hang on, previously I was able to charge X and now I'm getting pressure on that and it has to be lower. Is that in line with your experience? Do you see other ways in which this financially or otherwise puts pressure on firms to make this shift? Like, point, will they be forced to switch and look towards transformation rather than do this as an innovation?
Yeah, I've been hearing my whole career since I joined the profession in 1984 that compliance is dying. I've never believed it. I don't believe it to this day. Compliance is only going to get more complex. Governments aren't going to stop writing tax laws, tweaking tax laws, issuing regulations, all that stuff. But AI is going to take care of a lot of it. AI is going to do the rote, predictable stuff that we shouldn't be doing. I don't want surgeons piercing ears. I really don't. And we need to stop doing that and do what doctors do what lawyers do, give it to the paralegals. And in our case, I think a lot of it's going to be the AI intern that's going to be doing a lot of the bookkeeping and the rote, reconciliation, all that type of thing. What I hope AI gives us is more time to be human. Think of all the hours that AI is saving firms. I mean, in some of the big four firms, it's already saved over 1 million hours. It's cut 1 million. Now, if you're selling time, you've got a problem instantaneously, right? And what are firms doing with that 1 million hours? The last thing I want to see them do is go out and get more work that can be automated. I want them to take that time and spend it and invest it with the customer and guide these transformations, because AI can't guide a transformation. That takes a human. And this is why I think convergence of AI coming onto the market, moving into the transformation economy, is just, I think, going to accelerate the ability of firms that make this move. It's going to accelerate their opportunity to guide transformations because now they have more time.
Agreed. And I think that points to perhaps another obstacle that I think a lot of businesses that charge by the hour using timesheets and so on have against then shifting their model to focus on delivering value and so on, which is that, timesheets reward certain behaviors and ways of working that other firms, particularly in delivering transformations, wouldn't tolerate. What are the sorts of things that you see those timesheets as motivating or creating in those firms?
Oh, tracking time. And I learned to stop saying timesheets because now there's AI tools that automate everything you do on your computer, and they can track every move you make on your computer, and they can give you a report at the end of the day. You spent so much time here and here and here, and you can even delineate it by customer. So it's not the timesheet per se. It's tracking time that I'm against. Time is a constraint. Bill Gates has the same 24 hours as you and I. Time can't be saved, hoarded, traded, sold, bought. If you could buy time, nobody would die. No rich person, at least, would die, right? Because they buy somebody's time. It's crazy to track something that's a constant in everybody's lives and in all living things. Time is a constraint. And I want to see firms just get out of that mentality, because first off, it's very short term. It's anti-innovation. I think they're tracking efficiency. There's primarily 4 defenses for timesheets. Mm-hmm. Anytime this topic comes up, you will hear 4 defenses, and here they are. We need timesheets to be able to price right. How would I know if my price was right if I didn't keep time? Well, because you're not pricing based on time, because no customer cares about time. That's the first. So that one's blown out of the water. Second, we need them to determine the productivity of our team. How would we know if employee A is more efficient than employee B? And my point to this is you already know your A and B and C players without looking at anything, without looking at any data whatsoever. You know who's professional, who's got pride in what they do, who's got a good customer service ethic, who's willing to learn. All of these things that are judgments, not measurements. And this is how we hire people, and this is why we fire people. We only use the timesheet as a justification for a decision already made. Third, we need them for project management. How would we be able to plan capacity without timesheets? Well, the problem with this one is timesheets look backwards. They don't plan capacity going forward unless you're estimating time into the future. And that is a valid project management tool, but there's no reason to compare it to actual. Accountants have this fetish. Anytime they budget or project something, they want to compare it to actual. No need to do that, because by the time you get the data, it's a sunk cost. Deadline's already late. The customer's already pissed off because you didn't make the deadline. The building didn't open in time. What the heck good is it going to be looking at a timesheet saying, oh yeah, we went over budget on that? So proper project management is projecting time into the future, not looking backwards. Do project management with timesheets is like timing your cookies with your smoke alarm. Ridiculous. And the fourth defense for timesheets is we need them to measure profitability. And this one is the hardest for accountants. This is a big part of unlearning, because this is a cost accounting mentality. First off, allocating hourly rates to jobs is not cost accounting, because hourly rates have profit built into them. You have to strip out the profit and do a true cost per hour in your firm. Now, that's going to greatly depend on how many customers you have, right? If I'm dividing it by 100 customers versus 150, it's a completely arbitrary calculation, because the economic fact is firms' customers don't have costs. Firms have costs. And that is something that cost accountants, and I'm a recovering and repentant cost accountant, so I know this. That's a very hard thing to get your head around, to be taught or told that what you learned in cost accounting is absolute crap. I'll give you a real quick example on this, Alexis, that illustrates it better than anything I could say. When Steve Jobs returned to Apple as the interim CEO in, I think it was 1997. And he said, I was looking at everybody's financials from the various divisions. Everybody has their little siloed P&L. Every division was profitable. And yet the company was losing $1 billion overall. How is that even possible if there's no correlation with cost accounting and cash? This is why Jeff Bezos said, I don't give a crap about margin. I can't pay my electric bill with margin. I care about free cash flow per share. That was his metric that he focused on. And that is not a cost accounting metric. That's a cash metric because you can't fake cash. I can play and allocate and BS costs till the cows come home. Different accounting methods, different depreciation lives, but I can't fake cash. Model.
Agreed. Yeah, I really like that. And I think I like how you outlined those 4 objections and how they're addressed. I think that there's also a sort of element that I'd kind of overlay on that, which is to say, even if hypothetically, even if those 4 things that you've described, even if a firm says, no, I can use it in that way, I would argue, yeah, but you don't.
But you don't.
And so even if it was like, oh, but I can use it for profitability, or I can use it for identifying team members that aren't performing, etc. My experience working directly deep inside firms is they don't. And they struggle with performance management of people, and they struggle with their pricing and all these sorts of things. And actually the gap is definitely not the linking back to that time tracking. It's, it's understanding the customer. It's defining what does the customer really want in terms of its transformation journey. It's defining what's the most efficient process through which you can deliver some of these compliance activities and leverage technology effectively and make sure your entire team are using the technology in a efficient, consistent way. It's about making sure that your team are well trained. It's about making sure that you're providing performance management processes that actually give you an opportunity to review performance and provide feedback on a regular basis so that poor performers are being identified and addressed. And frankly, if you're not doing any of those things I've just described, then time tracking is not going to then save you.
A managing partner just recently me on this. He says, what if I've got a job that we price at $1 million and it turns out we have 2 million into it when we're done? I said, well, first off, fire your pricers because they suck. That's the first problem. But second, how could you get in a mess like that? You have decades of timesheet data. You should know what every job, every task down to minute takes. You should, because you have all this data, but you never look at it. So what good is it? And the excuse for not looking at it is they say, well, every job's different. Well, then why track time?
There you go.
I mean, contradictions here just go on and on and on.
Indeed. And I think, I read an article of yours where you talked about how actually when it comes to pricing, if we take pricing as a particular area, the reality is that your cost doesn't matter in the pricing of your product, particularly in something like professional services, because typically your price starts off with what's the customer going to be willing to pay based on value to them and their next best option. And that tells you what your price has to be. Yep. Now the game is how are you going to deliver that and do so at an effective cost? Irrelevant that, and in fact, I see this all the time, is the ones that do the time tracking. Most common thing I see is either they were right, like their estimate of what they thought it would cost is about what it is, in which case everything's fine, or they were under, in which case I see the teams overdoing the work, like that they can bill the hours, which is incentivizing the wrong behaviors rather than adding more value. Or more likely, if they do overrun on hours, etc., perhaps because it's difficult to kind of know because they haven't really defined what done is, they end up writing off the additional cost anyway.
Right. They never adjust the price or fire the customer. They just excuse disparity away, whatever the disparity is, an over or an under, more likely an under, because realization rates are below 100% in the accounting profession for firms that bill by the hour. So the whole thing is just an exercise in futility. And by the way, it's incredibly expensive to run timesheets. Say $1 million firm, we estimated somewhere between 7 and 15% to feed that, print out the reports, suffer lag in accounts receivable because you're billing in arrears, so all the financing costs and tracking down customers and blah. and write downs, massive. And there's no benefit to it. There's no ROI. In fact, I think it leaves a negative impact on the morale. I think it's a value destroyer in the firm.
Yeah, and as you say, like cost impact is huge, including on cash flow as well. I think it might have been one of your articles where you talked about how you'd seen examples like in tax preparation where essentially someone will get their accounts to sign and the invoice to pay. And as a result, like they're getting paid so much earlier than otherwise they would have done if they had to say, well, I don't know how much to charge you yet because, well, firstly, we still haven't finished on this job because there might be more back and forth on this. But also, I haven't had all the timesheets in and so on, which creates this huge delay in terms of getting paid.
My airline has about $20,000 of my money and they haven't flown me a mile. That's because they price up front. Yeah, they could have headwinds and they could have more cargo or luggage weight or more passenger weight but you know what? They give you a price up because we should be doing the same thing.
Indeed. And so we've kind of talked about some of the kind of current metrics that people might use, or at least we've alluded to them. So utilization is a common one, like how much of our billable time is then being actually billed out. Write-offs being another metric that they might look at to see how much are we just then accepting that it's completely gone. If we deleted these sort of time tracking metrics, what would you recommend that firms replace them with?
Well, if you're in a subscription model, metrics are really well flushed out by venture capital firms, other types of entities that invest in subscription models. There's a couple of reports by Andreessen and Horowitz on their blog that talks about the KPIs they look at and analyze to value and invest in subscription businesses, whether they're startup or more mature. And there are things like cost of customer acquisition, lifetime value, your churn rate, things like that. They're really well developed and they even go into much more granular detail than that. I've got a whole list in my book about this, but Time's Up is the book. And so, but if you were in just a value pricing firm, not a subscription firm, I'd want you to look at leading indicators. There's a big difference between a leading and a lag indicator. A KPI, almost by definition, a performance indicator is data. And data, again, by definition, is about the past. The only way to into the future is to have a theory. If this, then this, right? If X, then Y. Net promoter score is a theory. I'm not saying it's always correct, but for some firms, it does seem to be predictive of future customer behavior. So offer the net promoter score as an example of a leading indicator. I like turnaround time. Every assignment you give a team member, what's their turnaround time? Let's track that, just like FedEx tracks on-time arrival, and the airlines do as well, because that's what matters. Because if you see a team member slipping on their delivery due dates, just like my publisher, I was late with every manuscript for every book I've ever written, that's torture because they're calling you every day. Hey, where's the book? Where's the book? And, you got to perform. But at least you have a chance to learn about a problem. Maybe the team member's overworked. Maybe there was a rush job, or maybe there's a problem at home. Could be a million different things. But the fact is, if you're tracking turnaround time, you at least have a chance to nip it in the bud before it becomes a problem for the customer, before the customer gets on the phone and starts screaming, where's my stuff? So we like turnaround time. And the other one that I really like is high satisfaction days. How many days do your team have where they just pump their fists and say, yes, this is why I'm an accountant. This is why I entered this profession. Maybe it was a thank you note from a client. Maybe a client's a gift for bringing them through a hard time, whatever. There's lots of different ways to get it. But I find if you have enough of those, that shows that you're walking your talk, you're living your purpose. And believe it or not, there's a correlation there with profit.
Yeah, indeed. If only on essentially employee retention, right? But certainly in terms of the impact that it has to people's delivery with clients and their efficiency, and everything is huge. And it's why, like in mine, we use weekly employee happiness surveys to help identify how people feeling about work, how people feeling generally, anything that could have been done to take them to a 10 out of 10. What were some of their wins? And we track that as one of our KPIs because exactly as you say, it's a leading indicator of how our team are feeling and so on.
I love that.
I really like that set of metrics. In terms of kind of switching gears slightly or taking that further. So if we've got, if we're making a shift, we've realized that time tracking is not helping us. We want to shift our strategy to be more purposeful and focus on transformation. We're changing our KPIs in the way in which we review and manage those. What else does this look like in terms of rhythm of a firm when it's more essentially, because we're talking about being more outcome focused, right? More outcome focused in terms of the transformation of the client, more outcome focused in terms of what it feels like for us to deliver, and also the delivery of a transformation or a service, but also profit to us rather than the time that's put in. How does leadership that's perhaps been more used to managing it through looking at time tracking, how would they manage that operating model?
Yeah, it's a great question. You got to move away from this production mentality of being on the billable hour treadmill, and you've got to start investing more time in the relationships with the customers. And that means asking more beautiful questions, probing, because the other great thing about transformations, Alexis, and this is so cool, I think, unlike products and services that message to the world, look what we can do, look what we can do. Transformations go out to the world and say, look at who you can become. And that's far more powerful. That gives you a lot more pricing power. It creates more value. But transformations are sparked because people all around the planet have aspirations, usually around the spheres of we want to be healthier, wealthier, wiser, or live with purpose and meaning. I promise you, every customer of every accountant's got aspirations around those 4 areas. It's our job to probe, question, and learn what they are, and then guide them into that desired future state. So you don't have to up demand for transformations. It's already there. You have to discover them. And that discovery process is going to take some time. And yes, unbillable hours. This is why that whole mentality to die, because you're making an investment in that relationship so you can uncover those transformations, and then you can do them over and over and over again through the lifetime of that customer. And that is a far different model than a production model that says bill, time, bill time. It's very similar, by the way, to what doctors over here that are operating in an alternative model known as direct primary care or concierge doctors. They are there to keep you healthy, not just to cure you when you present with an illness. That's a different mindset. And it's the same with transformations. You want to make sure that we don't waste the customer's time, but we also save them time by doing the books. I mean, taking care of all this crap that AI can do. We're going to do that. Then we want to make sure the time they spend with us in meetings, virtually or in person, is time well invested. We have questions, maybe we have a book to read, we have some type of probing insight. And then for transformations, we want to make sure that they feel their time is well invested, not just with us, but time that they're going to invest on their own, guiding their own transformation. Just like when you're trying to learn an instrument, sure, you have time with your teacher, but you're also practicing on your own. It's going to be the same in an accounting firm. So when we become the guides, because you can't sell a transformation, the customer has to want to change. It's completely different. Sales, marketing message, everything changes around that new economic offering. It's a new economic offering. That's why the old offerings don't matter. Somebody asked me, well, this isn't going to work in accounting. I said, it's not designed to work in accounting. It's designed to work on accounting.
Yeah, because it changes regardless of whether it's...
Yeah, it changes your economic offering. Whether you do it or not, firms are going to start to do it.
And I can see the pitfall. The mistake is that I think people fall into is they say, well, okay, I can see how transformation works for the advisory and consulting and so on. But if we're compliance focused, then this doesn't apply to that, does it? Because, you can't get transformations with tax return. And I think that misses the point, because it from everything that you said, I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, it sounds like it's not about applying this to an individual service or a product. The whole nature of your relationship and the value and the value perception from your client has changed, which means it might be even that you have accountancies that say, here's how we're going to change your, here's how we can support you in changing your identity. Here's what we think you could be. And by the way, the compliance, tax returns, etc., it's just something we do in the background as part of it, because those are numbers that are important to be done and so on. But yeah, we don't even price that separately. It's like all just rolled in. Is that the right way to look at this, or how?
I think it is for firms that do, that are very compliance heavy. That's not to say that there's not going to be firms that will exist in the transformation economy that just provide services, compliance services, but their pricing power, like you said earlier, is going to shrink. It's going to be commoditized. Commoditization is like the law of gravity, man. It just constant push down. Unless you have a great brand, great marketing, a lot of pricing power like Coca-Cola or Apple, your pricing is going to get squeezed, especially with, if your competitor is a place where I can go and upload all my shoebox full of receipts and it spits out a tax return, what do I need you for?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, particularly when we look forwards, as you say, the future of AI and the technology that sits on top of that AI will take so much of this either away from the direct client, or if you're smart, you as the accountancy firm look at that and go, it terrifies me that a client might take their shoebox of receipts, put it into AI and think they're going to have it accurate. I can help them work out how to do that, but in a both efficient way that also increases accuracy and is focused on what's material, what's going to have high impact, in a way that the non-trained client won't be able to. And I think you want to be ahead of that. But if you're charging per hour, your reluctance there will be, firstly, I have to spend a load of unbillable hours on working out this new process, a load of billable money on tools and so on. And then I'm going to reduce my billable hours because it's going to make all of this efficient. And of course, as you say, the fundamental business model, your strategy, everything has to change first before you can properly utilize these. Like, otherwise everything else is going to be, working at the edges, right?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And another very interesting thing that is going to change as we move forward with the transformation economy is a firm might decide to only offer a couple different types of transformations that they have expertise in, especially if they're complex, like estate planning. That's kind of an ongoing one because you kind of have to revise it if new kids are born or you have new heirs come in or whatever. But we're going to rely more on our social capital, our networks, just like doctors do. I don't do knee surgery. I don't do hip replacement, but I know specialists who do. So there's going to be more referral and more cooperation within the industry to bring in outside experts, maybe even to revenue share or, work cooperatively with different firms that offer different levels of expertise that you're going to need as part of guiding these transformations. So I think it's going to force us to specialize more, to niche more, and to expand our social capital where we can bring in other experts that fill the gaps that we don't offer.
Love that. I'm going to move us to some quick fire questions, Ron.
All right. I'll do my best.
What's the best question you've ever been asked?
Wow. What would you do if you knew you couldn't fail?
Cool. And what would you do if you knew you couldn't fail?
Wow. Repeatedly confronted that question, pivoting from being a practicing CPA to moving into speaking and consulting and writing books. At each one of those pivot points, I kind of had imposter syndrome. What the heck do I have to tell the world? Everybody's out there. They can do it better than I can. What am I going to add to this conversation? And I literally had to be slapped in the head by some mentors to be told, hey, you have a distinct voice. You have a message. Get the hell out there. So, how I've confronted that question.
Nice. What one thing causes the most stress for you or your team?
Oh, doing things that you shouldn't be doing. It's back to the surgeon's piercing. Nurses spend half their time doing paperwork. Doctors increasingly, I don't know if it's half, but it's encroached a lot on their time. I don't think there's anything more demoralizing than being in a fee for service relationship where the only way we're making money is when we're selling our hands rather than leveraging our knowledge, our intellectual capital, our social network, those types of things. And people will usually misdiagnose this as burnout. because people get cynical and they stop caring about their work and they're tired all the time. And people say, that's burnout. It's not burnout. We've been talking about burnout for 50 years. We haven't moved the needle 1 inch. In fact, if anything, it tipped over the other way because we're misdiagnosing it. If you go to a doctor with a problem and he misdiagnoses it, chances of a cure are pretty slim. We've been misdiagnosing burnout for 50 years. It's not burnout. It's moral injury. You're not living your purpose. And when you're on a fee-for-service treadmill, as you are if you work in an hourly-based firm, and even to some extent a value-based firm, because it's still based on a scope of work, and if there's a change, we have to go to the Department of Paperwork and get a change order and put up friction and barriers with the customer, needs to stop. The way I look at this, Alexis, there's a concept from medieval churches called the prebend, and that was an endowment that the church earned from tithing and contributions and things like that, land sales. And they gave the prebend that endowment, they endowed the role of the priest, not the rituals. Priests don't walk around with a digital price list. Oh, you want me to officiate at your wedding? That costs X. Oh, you want me to do your funeral? That costs Y. The role is endowed, not the rituals. And I think that's what the subscription model does for professionals. We're there to serve you, and you're covered for anything that we can do. There's the constraint that we can do. Again, I'm not going to do heart surgery, right? They're going to usher you to a specialist. We need to do the same thing, but we need to stay in our lane.
Nice. What book or podcast has been most pivotal for you in changing your life or your work for the better?
There's a book behind me by a guy named George Gilder called Wealth and Poverty. It was written in 1981. That book changed my life. That one single book changed I was an econ major. I read that book in one sitting, turned my world upside down. It inverted everything I thought I knew, made me reassess my worldview of how economies work, how economics works, how humans behave, essentially. And it just upended everything. And it also inspired me to become an author. So George Gilder's been my 42-year mentor. He's been on my show 5 or 6 times. I had a chance to meet him several times. Just a terrific guy.
Fantastic. And what's the one thing you want business leaders to take from this episode?
The world's not zero sum. You don't have to win. Somebody doesn't have to lose for you to win. For a transaction to take place, there has to be a difference of value perception. We actually, buyer and seller, have to disagree about value. If I'm trying to sell you my house, I have a very high opinion of its value. You probably have a lower opinion. The price that we reach, if we're both motivated, is just prices, how we divide up value between buyer and seller. Both parties walk away with a profit. And so in the real world, and this is a message specifically for accountants in the real world, debits don't equal credits, because the world isn't nicely balanced, debits and credits, because both sides make a profit. And yet the customer's profit's not recorded anywhere. It doesn't show up in GDP, doesn't show up in the accounting financial statements, but it's like dark matter in the universe. We know it's there. It's just really hard to measure. I always ask people, how much would you have to be paid to give up your smartphone for the rest of your life? Can't touch it, can't use it, and it's a retirement number people throw at you. Well, what did you pay for that smartphone? $1,200? How much profit did you make? And are you making every single day? We don't think of it that way, but that's the way the economics of it work.
Amazing. Love it. Well, you've been absolutely fantastic. Exactly as I expected. So thank you so much for your time today. I highly recommend that people check out VeraSage.com and thesoulofenterprise.com, which are the websites that you'll find Ron and some of his excellent work. I'll also include links to his LinkedIn profile, Twitter profile, and Facebook group in the show notes. But is there anything else, Ron, that people should check out?
Yes, the Soul of Enterprise. And then also our new entity is thresholdnow.com. And Threshold is all about helping professional firms, because that's the lane that we stay in, the transformation economy. So we're building a community of firms that are in the sandbox, experimenting with this, sharing best practices and doing that. We're releasing content, because this stuff is in the nascent stages of this, Alexis. It's so exciting. And new frameworks and models are being developed around the transformation economy. and trying to stay on top of it's like drinking from a fire hose. But I am really excited. I think this is going to be bigger than AI.
Fantastic. Yeah, and I would agree, and probably provides the answer to, well, if AI is going to do all these things, what do we as humans
What do we do?
Also really exciting, right? So yeah, I love that. Well, thank you so much,
Awesome.
Ron, for your time. I really appreciate it. To everyone else, thanks so much for listening. In terms of other resources you might find useful, there's a variety of playbooks that I've developed that you can get at airmanual.co/resources, including playbooks on how to manage more effectively, if that was something that you're nervous about, or some of the other sort of process areas that I referred to earlier, piece that you can use. But otherwise, if you enjoyed this episode, please do like, subscribe, share this podcast with other business leaders. If you don't know any other business leaders, go meet some. They're really lovely people. But otherwise, until next time, have fun.